you feel very alone, but it's a very kind of it's very wild. It's probably, one of the last true wildernesses on Earth. And to stand up on the point, and again, those at Bass will know what I mean, but to stand up at the point in winter, and behind you is the familiar, friendly, cozy lights of station, and ahead of you is just this big, vast, uncaring environment that you could fall off the face of the planet and it wouldn't care. And I think that the one of the things that probably a lot of us who do expedition medicine or like being outside really value is that feeling of wilderness and that humbling ability of nature to make you feel small.
Hello and welcome to the World Extreme Medicine podcast with me, Dr. Fionn Davis. I'm an emergency medicine doctor and expedition doctor. If you're looking for some inspiration, motivation, education, or maybe a little bit of escapism, you're in the right place. Maybe you're listening to this whilst going to work, maybe you're chilling in a hammock on a beach somewhere nice, maybe you're enjoying the sun in the UK. Wherever you are, kick back, relax, grab yourself a beer, a cup of tea. Maybe don't get a beer if you're driving, and then enjoy our conversation we've got today with Klara. Welcome to the podcast, Klara.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, a little bit about Klara. So I first heard about or kind of discovered Klara when I was a keen, green, budding expedition medic. And you probably don't know this, Klara, but I definitely stalked you for quite a long time before I met you. So I was looking for some inspirational female expedition medics out there to follow as some role models as I was trying to break into expedition medicine. Found your Instagram account and then have been following your incredible journey ever since, and fangirling pretty hard. So was so stoked when I got to meet you at the World Extreme Medicine Conference, and you were lovely. And do meet your heroes, ladies and gentlemen, because Klara was so nice. So yeah, we're going to talk through a little bit of your career, a little bit of your expeditions, including as the British Antarctic Survey doctor in Antarctica. And then we're going to go on to her new exciting adventures up in the Scottish Highlands. And I think you're currently packing for a trip abroad. Is that right?
I am definitely packing for a trip abroad. Panic packing is probably the best way to describe it, with about 7 different lists. But yeah, no, I'm packing, and I will be leaving for Mongolia on this upcoming Monday, the 26th of June.
Awesome. Well, have you got the whole kit spread laid out on the floor yet, or are we not quite there yet?
I know for those of you that do follow me on Instagram, there will be a post about it. It is a picture of kit on the floor. You have to do it. It's important.
Yeah, are you even an expedition medic if you don't, right?
Yeah, no, it's all part of the. I do feel a lot of people have gotten to know me over Instagram, so kind of it'll be on the page, it'll be on a website somewhere, but it'll be a picture of my kit.
You know what? I actually really inspect those pictures as well, because I'm always zooming in on everybody else's kit and I'm like, oh, that looks cool. What is that? Need to drop another, X amount of pounds on that. Obviously, that's essential.
Well, I mean, all kit is essential, and of course, every single time you pick up a new hobby, that means just you can buy an entire new set of kit. So that's the most important part of new hobbies. More kit.
Oh, every time you go on an expedition, you come back with a whole list of things that you need, because you're like, oh yeah, I obviously need this 200-pound water filter, etc.
I have 3 of those, so yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna buy some more, because my recent trip, I was like, yeah, I need these. All the Americans had them, and I was like, these are epic. I need some of these. Anyway, so getting back to Klara, I'm gonna do a little bit about Klara, so everybody's got some background. So she's mainly worked in emergency medicine. She had one of the clinical fellow jobs in Bangor in Wales, but now is sort of transitioning towards GP practice. She's passionate about polar medicine and education, and her travels have previously taken her to Panama, Nepal, Iceland, and Antarctica. She's a mountaineer, she's a climber, and she's also been a team member on many expeditions in the Alps, the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia, and Tian Shan in Kyrgyzstan. and she's currently up in Inverness, where she's just bought a house. Congratulations, tough market.
Thank you.
And she's about to go into GP training, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, something like that, with an interest in rural and remote medicine. Did I get it all in there?
Yeah, you got it all in there. I mean, the only reason I bought the house is mostly for the cat and so that I can have a gear room, which is the most important part of a house.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see the gear room. And we've already said hello to your cat, like pre-podcast recording. Beautiful little Inca, right?
Yeah, no, it's for again for those of you that know me from the internet. Inca features heavily. She's usually found supervising building sites, monitoring and judging everyone around us, and of course, making sure that I buy the correct house for her. She does not
Ah,
like Ernie, who also features, but that's the Ernie is the van.
oh yeah, we're going to talk about Ernie later. So to start with, do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself and maybe how you got into expedition medicine?
Yeah, so I kind of got into expedition in a weird and wonderful way. I at medical school I went to Imperial College. Initially was I actually wanted to be I was a diehard surgeon. I really wanted to do general surgery and I really enjoyed it. And at the time, I was also initially in my university career, I was rowing for Great Britain under 23s. And in my first year of university, it really hurt my back. Um, and so that kind of ended my rowing career, which in hindsight is probably the best thing that happened, but does build a tad of resilience when you kind of have to reinvent yourself at 21. So at the time, I had a friend who was a geologist. We went on a 3 week trek through the Alps. Any of you who know the ski route, the hot route, we did the whole thing. And I just fell in love with it as a thing. And it didn't hurt my back. It didn't hurt anything. And it was just stunning and breathtaking. So I made a total U-turn, did my kind of student selected module in pre-hospital medicine, spent a bunch of years bumming around with London Ambulance, and ended up doing my elective in Iceland. And that's kind of how I started to become interested in expedition medicine and, more importantly, just kind of life outside the hospital and outside being a doctor, because expedition medicine is just so much more than being the doctor. It's got a lot more to it.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to get pushed into that being completely career focused. Medicine's your life. That's all you make your choices for, etc. And it's really easy to just forget that life is about so much more than your job. And I think expedition medicine just keeps things in check a little bit. Sometimes just reminds you that you know have fun along the way. It's not all about the career.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we all face that point at the end of F2 where you look at the 18-year-old version of yourself who had a 5 and 10 year plan, and you go, well, that's not happening, and then you throw it all out the window and go do something interesting. So, I mean, for those of you that haven't, that's also a great way to go. There's nothing bad about going straight into training, but for those of you who are in any way unsure, you know, taking that extra time, taking a year out. I've taken like 5, so there you go.
Yeah, my 10-year plan has gone to shreds, but in the best way. So tell us a little bit about. Obviously, you did some experience in Iceland. I think you went out to Panama with floating doctors as well, didn't you? I did my elective out there as well.
Yeah.
Really, really cool
And I,
experience, isn't it?
yeah, no, yeah. So I did my elective in Iceland. So I did my elective mostly in emergency departments, and then I did a once-a-week shift with the Icelandic ambulance service, which is really interesting. And then I did a couple of um, observerships of their helicopter emergency services. So we never actually I was never on any live missions, or I was never intentionally on any live missions. I was on one accidentally. But overall, it was mostly just focusing on pre-hospital medicine and escaping on the weekends to go hiking as much as I could. But yeah, no, floating
Amazing.
doctors is amazing for any of you that are interested in them. There is basically rural general healthcare in the various indigenous communities throughout Panama. And then, yeah, just kind of was also involved early on with a company called Exile Medics, who were around in the early parts of my career and got me to places like Nepal and on some of the event races in the UK.
And then you graduated to being the Baz doctor in Antarctica, right? After a little stint in Bangor.
Yeah, I mean, like I never quite know how I quite landed that job, but it was actually um I interviewed for it. I'd actually heard someone speak, much like you guys are hearing us speak now. I'd heard someone speak at a conference. I was like, well, I want to do that. Added that to my 5 year plan and interviewed for it. Didn't think I'd get it first time round, but found myself 6 months later starting in Plymouth. The Basmood job is a very once you commit to it, you're committed to the whole of it. So you've got 6 months of training in multi-specialty training, everything from, plastic surgery, nursing care, ENT, dentistry, dive medicine, you name it, we cover it at some point. Um, and it's a fantastic opportunity to learn. And I did learn a lot, even though I was unfortunate enough to be doing that job during COVID. So a lot was shut and a lot was not quite as it should be. But it was a real the training in and of itself is actually it's worth doing the rest of the job just for the training. Um, but then you are away from it can be anything from 6 months to in my case 20 months. So it can be a long stint.
That is long. And so, how long was the training that you did leading up to that?
So the training was 6 months, which I believe is the longest training for the Antarctic winter job in the world. I might be incorrect, but I think it's pretty much there. Um, and then you deploy. So there's three jobs going. There's one on the ship, which is 6 to 8 months. If nothing scuppers your plans, which it's an expedition, something always does. Then you've got a job in South Georgia, which is in the sub-Antarctic area. It looks a lot like New Zealand and Scotland, just like on steroids. It's beautiful, full of wildlife, and it's a very small team, so it's about kind of like 8 to 12 people. And they're there for 13 months to 14 months, and then you've got the Rothera job, which is the main station on an island just off the continent. This supports flying, diving, boating, and has a huge base population. In more recent years, has been also supporting the building of a new base structure. So this had quite a lot of construction work there as well. So that brings an entire new raft of medical anxieties for you to worry about late at night. But it's a big fluctuating population. So you go from 23 in winter ish to about 180 in summer.
Yeah, I bet you get a little bit of trauma from the construction side of things, and I guess trauma in Antarctica is not ideal.
I mean, like, you really hope never to get. I mean, like the size of the vehicles, like kind of, there's no trauma involved. It would just be a, kind of, it would not be a less fortunate ending for that person. But so we were very lucky. We didn't have any. Actually, the building guys are probably the safest guys on the station. They're really really excellent, and they are all mostly Scottish. Actually, work up in Scotland a lot of the time.
They must be the only people crazy enough to go want to work in the dark for, I don't know how long it is, but for a very long time, the dark and the cold, right? They basically do that anyway in Scotland, so they fit right in.
So it's actually the other way around. They come in summer when it's 24 hours of darkness, which actually we are pretty much experiencing up here in the Highlands. It doesn't ever get fully dark. It does get dark-ish, but it's a twilight. Yeah, no, they're just doing summer than summer. But our summers in Antarctica are a bit colder than the Scottish summers.
Yeah, maybe they just go to get away from the midges then.
That's probably more accurate. The only thing that's going to chase you in Antarctica is a penguin. So they're not very
Oh,
vicious.
and so you've got to ask when anyone's done an Antarctic job, did you get some amazing penguin photos?
I got some amazing penguin photos, but probably my best piece of footage slash media, which I think is amazing. It's not hugely artistic, but it is a Weddell seal farting at the camera.
Yeah, 100%. Once in a lifetime opportunity, that one.
Yeah, I mean, like penguins eat your heart out, but like go to South Georgia for that. But like for a Weddell seal to just kind of look at you, make direct eye contact, and just let one rip was a magical moment, especially as I got it on film.
Wow. I can just picture that happening weirdly.
So
Maybe, yeah, maybe you can send us the video footage or something, and we'll get that up on the website somewhere. That would be epic. Okay, so I know you can't really condense, such a long time in Antarctica into some highlights and lowlights, but I'm going to ask you to try and do it anyway.
I think the highlight, and this is actually to the people in Antarctica, very happy midwinter to you all. And midwinter is the highlight of the Antarctic experience. It's the darkest, it's the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year. It's almost like our Christmas. So we all have a big meal, we celebrate with each other. You've known each other long enough that you kind of feel like a little dysfunctional family, and there's a lot of homemade gift giving. And I think that and the run up to midwinter for me, um, you know, it was, really reconnected me with my crafting side, really made me more creative. Everything is salvaged on the station. So it really makes you think about your waste, and it kind of just makes you think a little bit more about reusability of things. And also that time of year is stunning. The sun never rises. So it's just this perma twilight, and it turns these snow-capped mountains just this purple color at all the times. And the sky, because there is no sunlight, but there is light, the sky just turns these incredible, just pastel purples and pinks, and you feel very alone, but it's a very kind of it's very wild. It's probably, the last one of the last true wildernesses on earth. And to stand up on the point, and again, those at Bass will know what I mean, but to stand up at the point in winter, and behind you is the familiar, friendly, cozy lights of station, and ahead of you is just this big, vast, uncaring environment that you could fall off the face of the planet, and it wouldn't care. And I think that the one of the things that probably a lot of us who do expedition medicine, or like being outside, really value is that feeling of wilderness, and that humbling ability of nature to make you feel small, and really make you kind of remember that nature itself is uncaring, and it's up to you to make your stamp on the world. But kind of nature is just like, and it's going to continue whether you were there or not. And I think that was quite a magical feeling, especially in winter when the station's so empty.
Wow, I think you described that so well. I can really get a sense of what it must have been like. And yeah, nature is completely indifferent, uncaring, and sometimes that perspective in life. So, that was a little bit. I guess that sounds like a real highlight for you. What about maybe some of the tough times, the difficult moments? It's a lot of time on your own, a lot of time in a confined space with a small group of people. How did you sort of, yeah, how did you find that?
I think the thing that surprised me the most, I mean, there's obviously, you touched on a couple things that are challenging. And of course you get, interpersonal dynamics, all this kind of stuff. But actually the thing that I think caught me off guard as a doctor was how clinically lonely I felt. Um, I didn't have anyone. You underestimate the value of bouncing your ideas off people, and I'm sure that actually the Highland Ps or rural general practitioners will kind of know this feeling. But to be clinically alone, and yes, of course, you've got your seniors back in Plymouth, you've got your top cover, but there's no one there in the office to talk to, and you don't have a team. Your team is you, and that I think surprised me how much I being a doctor in a team, albeit a small team, but I really did miss it. And I actually remember, calling my boss, and being kind of like, I just really miss being a doctor. And actually, that was quite a reassuring. It was a reassuring thing to miss, because a lot of people sometimes go on expedition, they realize they don't miss being a doctor, and then they come back and aren't one anymore. But I think that was the thing that surprised me the most, how difficult I found it being alone clinically, um, and how much I really value having a team around me. And I think that was one of the reasons I returned to Bangor, was because it's such a good team, and I missed that team. And to be amongst friends, and clinical friends again, who you can, because medicine is a different language, who you can speak medicine to. And it's one of the things I'm really looking forward to about this upcoming trip to Mongolia, is that I'm not the only doctor. There's a couple of us on the trip, and it just makes you. And I think that I would be hard pressed to do a long deployment or a long trip without another doctor. Actually, in fact, because I think I really value that team mentality, and two heads are always better than one.
Yeah, like healthcare is a special breed of person, and like you said, we have our own language, and we are very happy talking about bodily functions and all sorts of bodily fluids whilst eating our lunch. And we I think we are the worst people to go out to dinner with. Everyone always knows you go out to dinner with like a load of healthcare people, there's going to be a lot of shop talk, and that's because we like it. Actually, we actually quite like our
Yeah.
jobs. We find them really interesting, and we like chatting about all the horrible things that happen at work. They're actually pretty funny, and we're actually pretty privileged to be able to see
Well,
and
we
to
think
talk
they're
about with
funny.
each other.
They're not as funny as we think they are. We think they're hilarious. Most people are just slightly grossed out by it.
Horrified, yeah. Sometimes you don't
Horrified.
pitch the
It's because
dinner
like,
story quite right.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't pitch that dinner story quite right, and you think you've just dropped the punchline, and everybody's staring back at you like that is awful.
They're like, "Are
Yeah.
you a
Anyway,
counselor?" And you're, "No, no, no. This was a joke. This is funny to me." And they're just like, "No, we're concerned."
yeah, you miss having that banter and that camaraderie with people. I can definitely see how that would get hard to be on your own in that kind
Yeah.
of circumstance. Yeah. We're definitely gonna dive into Mongolia a little bit later on because that sounds like a really fascinating trip too. So then you came back to Bangor, some great clinical fellow jobs in expedition medicine in Bangor, that I'm aware of, and it's yeah a great ED team. So what sort of happened then when you got back?
So I elected not to go straight back into clinical practice, and I actually thought about this a lot when I was, because I sailed home on the Sir David Attenborough, which actually was quite a nice reentry, nice and slow reentry. I remembered what sun was and trees and people and other people I didn't know. But I think kind of one of the things I really, really realized was that um, I had left a lot of people behind, and they had gone through an experience I will never understand. I'll never understand being a healthcare worker in COVID. I mean, I was there in 2020, but not really. Um, and they'd gone through this big experience that I hadn't really ever been able to empathize with, and so I recognized that I needed to give my time back to my friends and my family. So I spent the first real month or two just making sure that I was still friends with everyone. Because one thing about expedition medicine, as I'm sure all of us have known at some point, is that you're sucked into that tiny bubble, and it is your life, and it is your simple life, and you don't really have room for other people in that sometimes. And especially if you go away for 2 years, you come back, you got to make sure that the people you left behind are still there. Um, so yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to make friends. Uh, Still felt that I was of value to them, and my family too. Um, and then I embarked on my own personal project. I spent my Antarctic winter millions. It's not millions, by the way, for those of us that are listening, that they're shaking their heads. It's really not. It's just a bit of money that we don't normally have. Um, and I renovated a house that I'm very privileged to own, and I did a lot of DIY. I applied a lot of skill that I learned down south, and I was my own boss for 3 months. But most important, I got to take out any frustration I may have had on partition walls and my garden. So I think that for any of you that do long deployments, or any of you that do long stints, be mindful of how you come back. Probably don't do a locum shift the week you come home. Realize you'll need to decompress. Realize that you'll need to talk to your family and remind them that you exist. Remind that your friends that you still care about them and like them, and then go do something for yourself that isn't medicine, because you will have been on call and not really realize how stressful that was until you stop. And I think that it's really important to just, however long that takes, and kind of just to take a little while. So I took about 3-4 months, and then I went back to clinical practice, as you said, the very lovely and very welcoming and very friendly emergency department in North Wales.
I think that is so important to be able to take that time to reassimilate, to reconnect with people. And for me personally, sometimes expeditions can feel a little bit self-indulgent. I'm going off and I'm having a great time. I'm doing what I want to do, in these amazing environments, amazing experiences, and I'm relying heavily on my family to look after my dog and my partner in order to look after the house. And it can feel a little bit self-indulgent. And so yeah, it's really important to recognize that, and those people that enable you to go and do this.
Yeah, I think the more you touched on, people who are important in your lives, I think the thing that, you know, was a blessing for the Basmu job is that I didn't, I had my cat, which I was very fortunate. One of my best friends looked after for me. But I didn't have. I was single. I was, in my late 20s. I didn't own a house. I lived out of the back of my van. Um, you know, there was no. I had no ties, and I think kind of that's one of the things I'm actually packing tonight. I have a huge amount of anxiety. I spent an hour at the pet store guilt buying my cat a new scratching post. Like, does she need one? Absolutely not. She's a princess. She has many. But I think as we have more attachments, and as we have, I'm leaving my partner for essentially over a month, and just told him to just deal with communicating with me by satellite phone, which isn't what normal girlfriends do. So I think that as we get more ties, it is more, yeah, especially that giving back to people, like kind of you do, it is self-indulgent, of course it is. But it's really fun, and it makes us really happy. And I think the people that value our happiness understand that we will come back to you. We will, because we need to come back to you, and we need you to come back to us, and we be able to come back to you and come back to our homes and our bases. But allowing us and letting us and supporting us doing weird and wonderful stuff, especially as a woman, which kind of, it seems like guys get a slightly easier ride, but that, especially as a girl, having your partner just be like, yeah, you can leave for ages, you'll be fine, it'll be great, I'm super excited, send me a postcard, is really worth it. So to all the partners out there that are listening, thanks for putting up with us.
Yeah, absolutely. They're kind of the unspoken heroes of anyone who goes on expedition. Um,
Yeah, they do panic 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't have enough water sterilization tablets, or I need to go outdoors for the 10th time because I forgot to buy a hat. And they're just like, okay, let's just get in the car.
oh yeah, we were in the middle of buying a house when I went to the Yukon with no signal and couldn't do any of the admin or any of that goes along with that. I was like, yeah, thanks for that. Goodbye, bye. Off I go. Yeah, it was, you know, it's a thing. Thank you so much for all the understanding partners out there who put up with all this crap. I think the other thing you said there is my personality is very much like, oh, well, I'm coming back from a trip, and so I'm going to just immediately dive into medicine because I've missed it so much, and like I want to get back into it and, get right back on that horse. Like, don't feel nervous about it. Just, I'm going to book all these shifts and I'm going to make myself really busy. That would be my definite approach. And I think it's quite hard actually to be a little bit more measured sometimes and just say, right, well, actually, I think I need a little bit of time here to just
Well,
get back to
it's easy to
reality.
go. It's super easy to go be busy because then you don't have to think about it. And then you don't have, it's kind of, especially people who do expedition medicine, like, let's be honest, we're all slightly on the neurodivergent spectrum. We have attention issues, we like to have multiple different stimuli, and we get bored, and that's why we need to constantly travel, or be outside or be somewhere interesting. And I think it is really hard for that personality type to stop, um, and just reflect. But I think actually, however you reflect, for me, I journal. I think one of the most fun things about my house and unpacking my house was unpacking 2 shelves worth of personal journals dating back to when I was 14. Um, I had a lot of different problems then. It was mostly just like, so and so is a meanie, and I have a crush on John, and you're just like, okay, whatever, great. But I think, however you reflect, whether it's looking through your photographs, whether it's, taking a long walk, whether it's just not doing anything, whether it's actually unpacking your bag, because, all of those amongst you, how many of you unpack your bag the night you get back? Or how many of you sit there and look at it and think, I'm going to unpack it later? Because actually, it sounds awful and it's a weird and very obvious metaphor, but like, you haven't unpacked your bag and you haven't unpacked your trip. And that's not just a physical thing, that's a mental thing. And I think that, you know, if you've been away for a week, take 10% of the time you were away and just dedicate it to being back. Um, you know, I was away for 20 months. I took, 3 months to reset myself. And it did me a world of good. And it also meant that when I did return to medicine, I was so excited. I was just over the moon to be a doctor again. And I was like, I'd taken all my courses and I'd read all the books and I was like, I get to go put on a stethoscope and scrubs and be an A&E and it's going to be great. And it was. And I think that if I'd gone back too soon, I would have been really tired and it would have been really hard.
Yeah. You bring back that enthusiasm for work because you're like, yes, I love my job. I'm so lucky to do this, etc.
Yeah, and everyone else, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but and everyone else who's kind of like been there on full time is just like, oh, for God's sakes, just piss off back to wherever you were. So yeah, no, I
I
think
know
kind
you
of
like bounce into the department and
you
you're like,
bounce in,
hi
you're all
guys,
happy, and they're
how's it
like,
going?
and they're all just like,
Yeah.
we did COVID and you left, and you're like, whoops.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm back now. um, talk to me about your love affair with grass when you came back.
So yeah, for those of you that don't really realize, I was actually I can't remember what the book is, but there's a theory about mental health, and the theory is that you need greens and blues in your life in order to feel calm, and it centers you. And I'll text Fionn, and she can have the link for the book in her bio somewhere, but it's in this I think it's actually a book called Wintering, and it's about things that winter, things that hibernate, how we go through wintering phases of our lives. And long story short, I didn't see grass for 20 months. And when I got back home we docked in Harwich in Suffolk, and then I went immediately straight from that into my parents' car and driven to their house, which is basically greenery with a June sun. And so I went from seeing nothing but flat ocean to green and blue. And it was so vivid and it was so beautiful. And I hadn't seen grass for a while that like I got out of the car, didn't unpack, didn't see my friends, didn't see my family, went straight to the lawn, stuck my face in it, inhaled deeply and cried for 10 minutes. And I think my friends were just kind of like, is she okay? And my mom was like, no, probably not. But she also hasn't seen grass in a while. And that's kind of where I was at for the rest of the day. I having got off the ship, I was just kind of in a stupor, really, at how green the world was. I was just like, where has this come from? Like, and Antarctica has lots of colors too, but it paints with a color palette. It paints with a cold color palette. The blues, the purples, the deep, deep blacks and navies. And you get back to the United Kingdom and you realize just how green it is. And it's just in the sense of the smell of the grass, it just hits you in the face. And it's almost overwhelming. Almost as overwhelming as the decision fatigue I got when I first went into a Tesco's Extra. And oh my God, I had to walk straight out. But, kind of the grass and seeing nature again, and also seeing we saw this in the Falklands. My marine biologist Ryan Matthews and I were absolutely horrified that there was a house over there with people in it with shoes outside who we didn't know, and we would never know, and that was terrifying to us. And we were just like, oh my God, what are strangers? And then we saw a child, and then that was us done for the whole day. We were like, our minds have been blown. So it is incredible the things you miss when you leave normality. I think for me, it was kind of, I went to a supermarket and I was just like, there are so many different types of things that you can milk now. That's a thing. That wasn't there when I left in 2020.
Oh yeah, yeah. The dairy section's really exploded. There's a lot of different choices there now. And what about how did you
Yeah.
find trying to explain what you were processing and what you were going through to people around you who haven't been through the same experience as you?
Um, so it's a bit difficult actually with love to the people who are close to me in my life. Um, their attention span for Antarctica, and we took bets on how long this actually would be. People's attention span for Antarctica was about 2 minutes. And obviously, you guys are really interested because you want to do it as a job, or you think it is an amazing experience. But honestly, my family were like, yeah, 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 you were away for 2 years, hug a penguin, whatever. More importantly, like we just want you here now. And I think a lot of the time, people wanted that 20 months condensed into a couple sentences. They they think you've been on a holiday, and this is again quite difficult for my parents to wrap their heads around. And some of my friends, like, when we go on expeditions, it's a job. We're at work. It's really cool, and we make great pictures, and it looks really fun. But remember, social media is percent BS. And of course, it's not fun all the time. And of course, like my day spent counting paracetamols into the formulary, there were 940, by the way, um, was boring as hell. Um, but that's the part you don't see. You don't see the last minute, calling all your friends to try and get a suture pack because SB services are out of stock. You don't see the midnight cramming of kit lists. You don't see, the anxiety that we go through when we're looking at the risk assessment going, oh my God, I really don't want to have to deal with a head trauma in the middle of nowhere. That would really suck. And all that really your friends see when you come back is she took a video of a seal farting. It is the best thing since sliced bread. And it is. But that's only a small part of it. And I think that's hard to communicate. And I actually don't think, for those of you who have a lot of friends who do not do expedition medicine, and this isn't to tell you to totally give up, but don't be disheartened when they don't care. Because they will think it's really cool for about 2 minutes. Then they're over it. Because they don't care. It's not their passion. Um, and that is fine. It's just that our hobby and our career passion is really intense. And not that others aren't intense, but it is an intense experience. And that intensity doesn't always translate well back into the real world. But it does between friends. So make friends who are expedition doctors. I think definitely Fiona and I have had this chat where, we've had loads of chats about how we feel coming back, how we feel about expeditions, how we feel awful that we're not on one all the time. I mean, kind of find your friends and find the friends that get it, because a lot of your friends who don't do expedition medicine won't, and that's okay, but they won't.
Yeah, totally. I've had the oh, so how was your holiday? And it's like it wasn't a holiday. It was work. I had to do stuff. Like, yeah, there was mountains and it was great and but yeah, people don't understand it. And yeah, it can be hard to get people to understand why you do it and why you use your annual leave or why you do these things and you often don't get paid for them or people don't get that. It's just can't explain it, can you, to people who kind of don't are not into the same thing. And I think that's it's partially why and this is a bit of a shameless plug here, but like things like WEM, things like the conference, things like going on courses or listening to podcasts like this, etc. It's really good because you hear that there's a whole community of people out there that are into the same weird stuff that you are, and that you're not the only one. And it's cool to go and hear about everybody's experiences. It's dangerous too because then you're like, oh God, I've got to go and do all these things too. This sounds amazing. There's so much out there. But yeah, it's a really nice community of people to go and share experiences with.
Yeah, and
So
also,
maybe
kind of they can ground you about the expedition FOMO because they can remind you that actually they have spent their annual leave doing this really cool thing, but actually their day to day is like a really busy emergency department in the middle of like a city. And that's like, you're like, yeah, this is great. I have a picture on Instagram of, like my cat in a field. But, I also just, spent my entire day doing palliative care and told like 10 people that they were dying. So like there's also like kind of the work side, which I think it's nice to have pals like us. So, um, we look forward to hearing from you in whatever capacity and meeting you at some point.
Yeah, and like genuine people, not like, you were saying about social media, Instagram, all of this. It is all the rosy stuff. It's not the hard stuff. It's not the boring stuff. And you're seeing the highlight reel of somebody's life, and it's not the reality at all. But it puts immense pressure on people to feel that they need to go and emulate this or do this, or that that's what they need to be aiming for. And it's not reality. I think it's I was going to ask you this about social media as well. Like, you're obviously quite a big social media presence, and in terms of role models, I think it's great because you can find some really amazing people out there to follow and to use as a role model. But do you feel a pressure? Do you feel that pressure of people looking to you, or kind of, hanging on every post or every word you say when you're putting stuff out there?
I mean, I'm firstly very flattered that if people are actually genuinely holding, hanging on my every construction post, which is usually just me with a power drill. Um, but I think actually a friend of mine, he's an editor at the Adventure Medic, Everett, who's also been to Rotherham. We talked about this recently. Um, and it was about kind of how loud to shout on social media. Because the answer is, the short answer is yes. It's not a pressure, but I do feel, and I have an awareness of what I post online, and I think that I use my Instagram posts for a slightly more professional slant, and I have been increasingly doing that in the last 4 years. I use my stories as fun, silly things so people know that I'm like a real human being who does normal stuff. And again, like if you follow me on Instagram, like you'll know that kind of like the posts tend to have like, like a relatively, esoteric live, laugh, love, tagline to them. And the stories are like kind of actually quite fun. So I think that with social media, it's getting that balance right. It's making sure that you are using your voice and your platform to inspire, but also to ground. So, we're talking about not having rose tinted goggles. I have been very lucky in that, for the most part, people seem to appreciate the fact that I do tend to sometimes post about hard things too, or talk about things that I'm finding difficult. I've never cried on camera. I'm not quite that bad. But, I think that it's really important for those of us that are social media, and there's a few of us, to have an awareness of what you're posting, who is going to see it. And I think especially as you get more senior or more well known, you have a responsibility, to be approachable, but also to retain professionalism. So, and that can be quite tricky. As it is on Expedition, it can be quite tricky in the social media sphere. So, I very much encourage people who meet me to send me a message on Instagram, and I'm very happy to get messages on Instagram. But I think kind of increasingly, yeah, there's an awareness about kind of, I hate to use this phrase, but yourself as a bit of a brand, and that people who might want to employ you are looking at your social media. And mine is open, so you can look at it, which is great because it's inspiring for people like me 10 years ago who didn't have anyone to look up to. And I feel very, very humbled that people think that I'm in any way in that league, but I really hope that it does inspire people. But it's also real enough, that people understand that, expeditions are not just mountains and rainbows.
Yeah, totally. And I think the whole brand thing is something that I'm starting to pick up not for myself, but just to realize that people are using this as like a career kind of, selling yourself, selling your skills, showcasing your experiences kind of platform, and that, it is really becoming a way of networking. And it's, yeah, so what people are putting out there is what they want you to see, in a very sort of targeted and like specific way. So I think I've started going that way myself, but I am nowhere near on Clara's level yet. But Yeah, because it may generate jobs for you. It may generate networking that leads to employment and that sort of thing. And we always want to be chasing the next adventure, etc. But people should be aware that that's what we're putting out there sometimes.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're it's our professional, it's our CV in pictures. But I think the kind of having, enough of a personal side to it that, you can make friends. And, because actually social media is supposed to be about making friends. And I have made a lot of friends through Instagram. There's people I met at the World Extreme Medicine Conference who I only ever knew through social media. And we were thrilled to meet each other for the first time. It was super fun. But I think, again, kind of it's because if you use your stories to get people to get to know you as a person, and your posts, the lasting thing, the thing that doesn't disappear in 24 hours, can be more about, for that employability side, or just for people to look back on. And if they want to be inspired through your posts or actually read them, like, that's really cool. But I also think kind of like, yeah, I think it needs to have an awareness. There needs to be a balance. You need to have a bit of responsibility about what you put out there. If you're going to put facts on there, please fact check it and include references. And, it's medical community has a responsibility to be, open, honest, and, correct, or as correct as we can be. So I think, yeah, for any of you that do put, and there's some amazing doctors putting some really good stuff online. But yeah, please include your references because we want to go read it too.
So something that we were maybe going to touch on a little bit later, but just kind of flows nicely here is that whole kind of role model, and maybe you didn't have anybody when you started getting into this 10 years ago to look up to. But in particular, like women in the field, I don't think there were that many to look up to when you first started getting into it. And I guess now you're in that position on the other side of things where I imagine you've got people asking you for advice.
Yeah, and it's mostly women. And um, I mean, I'm really very. I can't find the words quite. It's overwhelming slightly that people do think of you as a role model, but I very much take it very seriously. And I do get a lot of young women asking me a lot of questions about expedition medicine, because a lot of the time we do just see a sea of men. And I think that one of these, this is quite poignant. I went to, I'm not going to quite name the conference, but I went to one of the pre-hospital medicine conferences about 6 years ago. I was just finishing medical school, and it was one of the London HEMS consultants who's a woman, and she stood up and she said, "Raise your hand in the room if you're female." And there were 3 hands in the room. It was a packed lecture theater, and it's not that long ago, and it's changing. It's good, but still, I've taught on courses where the faculty is mostly male, and I've actually had younger women come up to me and say, it was just really nice to see one of the instructors, in full mountaineering garb, or come in out with the weather, like really, looking the part, next to the guys. And that's, sad that they don't have more of that, but it's a real privilege to be that. And another thing that I think kind of women particularly tend to ask me about is, if you're the only woman, or if you're a woman on expedition, what's your experience with sexism and gender inequality. And I'm lucky that I haven't had too much experience with that, but kind of some women are worried about their safety. If they're one of the only women on expedition, they're worried about, I've had questions about, sexual assault on expedition. Again, I don't know of any cases about it, but, to the point where there are younger students and young women asking me if that's a thing they need to be concerned about. And, you are in these really remote environments with people you kind of have to trust. And it's good that it's now a conversation topic to bring up. But I think that kind of as more women get into it, the more we can support each other. And it's really important for the people who they look to. And I'm very glad that some people include me in that, to be vocal about. It is hard being the only girl. Yes, I do make men talk about periods and they don't like it. Yes, I have had sexist comments whilst working for various organizations, have felt objectified by, men on an expedition. And no, I've never felt unsafe, ever. And I'm very lucky, but it's not an experience I've had. So for all of you women listening out there, you can do it. You can do it so freaking well, and you are going to kick ass. But, you're going to come up against a little bit more discrimination than you would in your normal life, because that sphere it's changing, but it's still very male dominated. And you're going to need to prove that you're twice what they are. But actually, there was an expedition I did in Kyrgyzstan, where culturally women don't shake hands with the men. And I was the only woman in the expedition group. And, they all thought it was ridiculous that I was sharing a tent with a guy, and everyone was, he's a very good friend of mine, actually. But at the end of the expedition, along with a couple, 3 or 4 of my other male members of the group, I was the only woman to have summited all the 3 peaks that were in our goals. And, I was tired. Everything was really heavy, but I'd kept up. And my Kyrgyz guide shook my hand at the end. That was a huge deal. And to the point where actually they asked me about this in my BASMU interview, and I told that story, and it's because it is a big deal when you're recognized as an equal. So, yeah, girls, you can do it. You are awesome, but you're going to encounter it at some point, and we are here to talk about it with you. And if, reach out to us and let us know your concerns. Tell us what you're worried about. We can help you out.
Yeah, totally. Love that message. Power to the women. But also, I think a lot of it. I think I'm lucky as well in that I've never really experienced too much of it on expeditions I've been on. But I do think there's a lot of it in my own head, with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, a little bit, I guess, in that I feel I have to overprove things because I'm maybe the only woman, or because I feel I've got to carry a bit more, or I've got to make sure I'm not the slowest, or those sort of things that go through your head. They're a little bit silly, a little bit egotistical, but just feeling like, I've got to hold my own in this group, and I don't want them to think that I'm being weak because I'm a woman. Yeah, you ever get those?
Oh God, yeah. I've almost injured myself because I carried too much weight. That was stupid. But, I think we do that in our normal lives anyway. But I think that in the expedition sphere, that insecurity that comes from sexism can hurt you. So it's still going to be a thing. You're still going to feel, if you're tired, and if you're, they're tired too. Of course, everyone gets tired. Men, women, everyone gets tired. But, kind of, you carry proportionally to you. You do proportionally to you. You don't need to do more. You don't need to be the most outgoing member of the group. Like, that's okay. And if people attribute that to you being girl, then, you can tell them where to put it, really. And you need to tell yourself where to put it too, because it can hurt you. And I think kind of that mentality and that insecurity that comes from background sexism, and you looking at someone's giving you the side eye, and you're like, oh my God, is it because I didn't do like every single night cooking in the cook tent? It's like, no, it's because like kind of behind you is a guy who, farted in their tent last night and he's annoyed about it, or just because he's thinking about like kind of how dirty his socks are, and you tend to be in the way of his stare. So, I think that women particularly tend to make, we tend to make it more about us, because sometimes it is about us, but don't let that insecurity is going to be heightened on an expedition, especially if you're in a small group, and especially if you're one of the only girls. But again, kind of like, this is where stuff like reflection and journaling and, having a couple people to talk to about this beforehand does help, because then you can realize that firstly, everyone feels that way. all the ladies feel that way, and then some of the guys, of course, men feel this way too. By the way, we're not being exclusionary, but there's more of you than us. So for the moment, we're going to talk about girls. You know, it's going to happen to you. You're still going to do the stupid thing you shouldn't do. Just remember, like, kind of check yourself while you're doing it and go, maybe I shouldn't carry like 90 kilos. I'll carry 70. I can do that. Or maybe I'll carry 90, but I'll do it in 2 trips. And that's fine. You're still doing the work. You're still doing the thing. You don't need to cook in the cook tent every night. That's not your job. It's your job a little bit, but like, you don't have to create creations every night. Like pasta bolognese 5 nights in a row is fine. And I think that it's up to us also just to not fall into those stereotyped roles as well and put ourselves there, because sometimes women are their own worst enemy, because we see it, and kind of we see it and we react to it because it can, it hurts sometimes. So yeah.
I think sometimes you can flip that insecurity sometimes to your advantage, though. If you are if those thoughts are going through your head, like, oh, like, mate, I'm really tired here, like I am really struggling, but I don't want to be the one that, like, shows it or voices it or anything like that. But actually, like my experiences on Kilimanjaro, which I've talked about on a previous podcast, but I was like, guys, like, look, I'm a human. This is hard. Like, I'm struggling. And that just creates an environment where everybody else feels like they can say they're struggling, and that's okay. So, yeah, we're all tired. Yeah, we're all really, like, hating this at points. But it just takes that one person to start that conversation, to own up to it and say, like, yeah, actually, like, this is really hard. And so yeah, getting over sometimes your own insecurities about, like, oh, break, like, yeah, forget that. As a
Yes, you
medic, you've
can.
got yeah, you've got a special position where you can actually model that insecurity, and then people are going to be like, oh yeah, well, if she's the doctor and she's thinking that, like, yeah, like, it's totally cool that I'm tired as well.
Exactly. And yeah, I think that's very well put.
Well, it's a way of flipping it, isn't it, and making it a positive. But yeah, I'm glad we've spoken about that, because it's a really important topic that, yeah, there's not that many of us around. There are more, and yeah, sometimes you got to get these things out there, make it known. I think let's pivot a little bit and then talk about um your side hustles and your things outside medicine, which maybe this transpired from Antarctica, and I know you did lots of bits and bobs around the base and things like that, but so Klara has already mentioned she's a landlord. She's also making her own hats. She's just bought a house in Inverness as well. She's always got a little hustle on the side going on, and I would love to know where that comes from, where that kind of entrepreneurial spirit comes from, and uh, where you see it going for yourself in the future.
So at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about how every hobby requires new kit, and how kit is very fun to buy. And that is what has inspired my side hustles, making myself broke from outdoor kit. No, in all seriousness, I think it is, there are lots of things that make me really happy. I've always enjoyed, arts and crafts to varying extents. I've always enjoyed being outside. I enjoy, and I've recently gotten more interested in kind of business and business mindsets and small businesses, partly because some of my friends are doing incredible startup businesses. Actually, one of the people who, it's a shameless shout out to the guys who actually stocked my medical kit for Mongolia, the Bradley at Mir Supplies. He's doing medical supplies, and he started that company during COVID by himself with his friend Kyle. They're both paramedics, and they're just doing other stuff, and I just think that that's really cool. And I think it makes you a more multifaceted person and a more multifaceted doctor. I think, I really got back into terrible, by the way, terrible quality carpentry and making things with power tools when I converted Ernie into a camper van from a shell. But that's actually really kind of transpired into something I'm quite interested in and doing, and maybe not monetizing, but I definitely have a shed full of stuff I like, doing things too. And I also, I think I learned to crochet in Antarctica. I found that it distracted me enough. It focused me enough on a thing to kind of make my brain quiet, but it didn't take up too much room that I could hold a conversation whilst I was crocheting. So, or I could just be in the back of a room and just be doing something, fidgeting. I fidget a lot. And I think that, having things that you do on the side, whether it is something that makes you money, whether it's something else that you enjoy, whether you're competitive in a sport, whether, you secretly are, Britain's answer to tap dancing geniuses of the world, having something on the side that isn't medicine is really important. And some of the most well-rounded doctors are the people who are also secretly a GB triathlete. We don't all need to be triathletes or athletes. We can just make hats. But, I think that having a side hustle and, having a mind for something outside medicine, you can bring those skills back into medicine and kind of, I hate to reference a quality improvement project in a podcast about being wild and out there, but, doing business stuff makes you go like, well, actually, like bringing it back to hospital, transferable skills, like, well, actually, that's a process we could totally do better on. And it makes you actually interested in it. So I think bringing in other aspects of other people's jobs, other people's skills, makes you a better doctor and also makes the boring side of medicine much more fun.
I've had this thought previously about how we recruit medical students based on their ability to manage multiple hobbies and volunteer in their spare time and also get amazing grades. And then we put them into jobs where they have no weekends, no evenings, no time. And they also, that means they don't have time for all those things that they used to enjoy and that were their coping mechanisms. And it's a complete recipe for burnout if you think about it. It's okay, we're going to recruit
Yeah,
these
we
people based
destroy
on,
their creativity.
yeah, oh,
We
because
take
we,
these
we don't have any
amazing young
time for it.
people. Yeah, we take these amazing young people and be like, yeah, you know how you used to really enjoy ballroom dancing, kind of like competitive knitting and debating. Well, great. That's fantastic. Well done. Now bin them for the rest of your life. And I think that that's it's a real shame. I think that's actually why a lot of doctors are now going to kind of less than full time. And it's really it's one of the positive things that's come out of COVID is people being like, actually, you know what? Service provision, nope, not for me. Like my time, but like the system is not helping us. So I'm gonna go 80%, spend the other time, kind of making tables, and that's great.
Yeah, actually, Clara showed me one of her tables that she's made just before we started recording the podcast, and it is a work of art. Beautiful driftwood, rounded edges, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so sometimes it's knowing like when you need to take a step back and actually just, that work-life balance gets a little bit out of kilter and you've got to make some choices in order to get it back in balance sometimes. I think the next question I was going to ask you was about we've touched on it already about kind of like a brand or selling yourself a little bit, selling your expertise, selling your skills, and it's not something that comes that easily or naturally to many medics or clinicians out there. But you find you kind of have to do a little bit in expedition medicine in order to get those jobs, and you're often working with companies who are not clinical, not healthcare. They're not any NHS affiliate or whatever, and so they're commercial, they're businesses, and like this is very normal in their world, but in our world, it's not. So I guess how have you learned that, and how have you developed that along the way? And any top tips?
I've had people who've done it before and made enough mistakes that they can tell me what to avoid. I think kind of people like Kyle and Brad really, really were interesting people to meet. They gave me a lot of really good advice. They helped me with, setting up the financial structure for, my property management stuff. And I have, I've still messed up, and that's fine. I think kind of my only top tip is, kind of if you're going to do any kind of, if you're going to attribute any kind of financial stuff to it, make sure that you know what you're doing beforehand. Maybe if you're going to start companies, or if you're going to be a sole trader if you're going to do all that kind of stuff. Maybe just, seek the accountant's advice. We can't do it all. We're very smart. We know we're very smart, but they're specialists in counting money and they know about tax. So I think the thing is, I would say about any kind of business stuff is consult those who know more than you. And as with medicine, recognize your limitations, because like, we're terrible business people. We work for free after 5. Like, come on, guys. If we were in the private sector, I'd be sending you a huge invoice about like kind of, well, I stayed late to deal with like Mrs. Miggins, who was really sick, so that'll be an extra X number of pounds. And I know some trusts do that, but let's be honest, who actually submits those forms? Because we feel really guilty. So yeah, you're a terrible business person. Find advice, seek a specialist, and be inspired by those of us around you that have done kind of the more interesting businessy things. And I do not claim to be an expert. Like, I know very little, but I'm learning, and I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, great. Love that. That's a great top tip. And so we're gonna like kind of start bringing it to a close, but first of all, we're gonna talk about the very important man in your life, Ernie, and how that came about. I'm just noticing that van life is everywhere. Everybody's doing up vans and staying in them, and on the courses at WEM and things, lots of the faculty, lots of the students, everybody's bringing vans and sleeping in hospital car parks and all sorts of weird stuff. What is this all about?
Well, so I bought Ernie. A hipster in this respect. Oh, that's not even a word people use anymore. But I bought Ernie in 2019. Sorry, 2018 even. He's a 1996 VW Transporter for all of you van nerds out there. Yes, he is gorgeous. Yes, he has many miles on the clock, and yes, he does make strange noises when you start him. He has a clutch. Yeah. Sorry, no, he has a scrap that. He has a what's it called? Oh, choke. That's the one. He has a choke. That's how
Oh,
old he is. Yeah. So, and the reason I bought Ernie was because I recognize that being mobile and being able to move around a lot is really important. My parents thought I was a complete and utter idiot. Now, fast forward, like, several years later, the number of times my parents have praised Ernie, because Ernie has saved my life because I've gotten too tired to drive and I've slept in a lay-by in my, memory foam mattress of my van. They now think it's the best thing since sliced bread. But, total plug it, total shout out to van life people. I'm currently going to a wedding this weekend and I'm not buying a hotel. I'm just going to stay in my car. Um, and I happen to have a little shower in there, and it's all very nice and cozy. I'm a bridesmaid, like there's an argument to say I should be staying in a hotel. No, I'm gonna park on the venue, and I'm gonna be there with the sewing machine, helping making alterations at the last minute. I'm gonna be parked on site, and kind of that's the full on you know duty side. And I think that the van and being mobile in your vehicle, whatever your vehicle may be, it allows you to, I have my swimming stuff always in the back. I've got a toolkit always in the back. The number of times someone said, does someone have a screwdriver? And I'm like, yes, what do you need a half for? I think that it has a huge amount of utility. When we went skiing. We went to the Doctors Updates conference in Val d'Isere this year, and there became a phrase on the trip that was just Ernie will provide, because everything that we could possibly think of when we're changing the settings in our skis and needed a screwdriver, we ran out of coffee and Ernie had coffee. Ernie will provide. Your van becomes a place where you can store stuff. It becomes a little home to yourself, and it's just really, it becomes a way of being able to be mobile. And especially with expedition medicine, or if you're locuming a lot, if you're trying out different jobs, different roles, sleeping in that hospital car park is a lot more appetizing when you have a bed. And or when you are doing a hospital night shift and you finish, or you're doing a shift and you finish, and instead of staying in that really grim hospital car park, you can drive to a beach and park there, and then you just feel better. So it enables you to access beautiful places, make them your home temporarily, and then roll your home somewhere else. And it's a real,
yeah,
yeah,
home is where you
it's
park it,
definitely.
right?
Oh, I hate that's so cliched, but it is. It really is where you park it. I mean, it is. Yeah.
I will never forget there was this surgeon at a hospital I worked at who used to sleep in his van in the car park because it was Wales and parking was free, and that, that's a thing over there. And he used to walk into the hospital every morning with a bottle of pee. Didn't really stretch to the full chem toilet situation. He was like, "Yep, here's my pee. I'm just gonna go get rid of this in the toilet."
Not gonna lie, everyone's got a pee bottle. Just label
Oh
it.
God! Don't get it confused with the
You know
apple
what?
juice, right?
No, mine's got a big yellow piece of paper, big piece of tape around it. But you know, ladies especially, no one wants to go find a bush in the middle of a lay-by at night. Get an Nalgene, a wide-mouth Nalgene. Stand in the shower. Practice. It will improve your life.
Wow, these are top tips I never thought we were going to get out of this. Top tips: practice in the shower, pee into that Nalgene, get your aim right. That's it. It's brilliant. This seems like a great
Yeah.
place to finish. I think the last thing I was going to ask you about was your upcoming trip to Mongolia. So tell us about that. What are you doing out there? I think it's a scientific trip. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm going out with the Scientific Exploration Society. There's about 30 people in the expedition. We were out in Mongolia for 20 days. A lot of it is on horseback. So we're taking 4x4s out to a point, and then our scientists are conducting their research at various sites, and then we do the main bit of the expedition on horseback. And yes, I can ride. Just it's been a while. And it's mainly just kind of it's science from the seat of the saddle, really. We've got base camps. We move every night. We're sleeping in yurts, and it's going to be a fantastic trip. I think I really enjoy working with scientists because you learn a lot, and don't worry, I won't forget to pack my pee bottle.
And are you the medic on this trip, or are you going as a kind of participant helping out, or what's the role?
So I'm one of the doctors on the trip. There's another doctor who's a GP called Luke Brown. He works in Oxford, and we also have in our midst a retired general practitioner from the Highlands who's worked up in Shetland called David Arathun. So we're a wealth of medical information, and we've also got some dentists traveling with us who are going to do some community dentistry. So, which is really great because I haven't seen my dentist in a while, so I kind of get a cheeky consultation. But I think in general, kind of is one of those wonderful trips that's giving back. It's working with a lot with the Mongolian University, and as with a lot of these kind of trips, it isn't paid, but that it seems a small price to pay for the experience. However, I think that is something that we can touch on in different podcast, but is something that I'm sure we
Yeah,
would all like to change at some point.
definitely needs looking at, doesn't it? We need to form a union or something. But what do you know what the science is you're going to be doing?
Off the top of my head, no, but I know that it involves a lot of botany, zoology, a bit of anthropology, and we're looking at the native horse species of Mongolia as well at the end. So it's the ones that are very close to the kind of origin species for horses. So whilst we are riding their modern counterparts, we'll be looking at the kind of the original. And I'm not going to try and pronounce their name because I'll get it wrong.
Well, super cool. That sounds really, really exciting, and hopefully we can catch up with you about it when you're back. I think we're hopefully going to get you on to do a mountain medicine webinar with us as well at some point.
Yeah,
So
I'd love
we'll
to do
look
that.
forward to.
And yeah, and for those of you interested in Mongolia, I will at some point get around to posting a couple blog posts about it, about kit, about what we're taking medically and personally, and then about what we do and what we're doing. And if you'd like to follow along on Instagram, it will be under the hashtag John Blashford Snell, who is our expedition leader. So we won't have internet for a large part of the trip itself, but that's where all the live updates will be through him and through his website. So stay tuned and enjoy.
So at John Blashford Snell.
No, so hashtag John Blashford Snell. It will be on my post about Mongolia as well. So I'll put all the things that you guys can follow: scientific exploration, SES Explore at SES Explore is who we're going with, and yeah, John Blashford Snell is our expedition leader.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for this chat. This was great fun, and hopefully the audience is still with us. We haven't lost them, or maybe they've like finished their commute to work now and they're sat in their car on the edge of their seat just waiting to go in. And hopefully we've put some inspiration, some motivation out there, and we look forward to talking to you again, Klara. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Fionn. See you guys later.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to. Please also head over to the World Extreme Medicine website, where you can find more engaging content on extreme medicine webinars and indeed a collection of courses from our global network, including humanitarian, disaster relief, expedition, space, military, tactical, and performance medicine. Thanks again.